Recently, Archbishop Listecki gave the invocation at the Republican National Convention. This prompted a question among some of our parishioners. Why would a bishop attend such an overtly political event? Isn't he endorsing someone or some party? Is that okay for him to do? In the United States, there are two sets of principles that govern how the church and the state interact with one another. The principles set forth by our Constitution and the principles set forth by the church, by canon law. In our Constitution, we have a separation of church and state. What this has meant has changed as the court has interpreted the Constitution and the surrounding laws. According to these principles, there's no problem with Archbishop Listecki giving the invocation at the Republican National Convention, because the Republican National Convention is not an exercise of state power, but rather an activity of a political group trying to influence the state. There's plenty of room for religion to have influence on the state. The Constitution is not trying to preclude that so much as to prevent the state, the government, from exercising undue influence on the practice of religion. Remember, the Pilgrims and many other settlers of the colonies in what we now call the United States were seeking to avoid, to escape undue government influence on religion. The other set of principles that govern how Catholics, more specifically clergy, should engage in the political order is canon law. According to canon law, clerics, especially priests and bishops, are forbidden from holding public office if that office gives them some kind of exercise of civil power. The reason for this is to protect the church more than it is to protect the state, to protect the church from the scandal that can be given in the working out of politics. How then should bishops and priests seek to lead the people of God in engagement with politics? I think in order to answer that question, it's important to distinguish between ethics and politics. Ethics tells us what's right and wrong. It is a field of philosophy, and it is deeply related to moral theology. Politics is the practice of engaging civically with people with whom you disagree for the sake of working out how we live together. In other words, ethics is a matter of what, and politics is a matter of how. Ethics answers the question, what matters? What should we or should we not do? What are the absolute boundaries of what's okay and what isn't? Politics works to resolve questions of how we function as a society when some people have one set of principles and other people have another set of principles. For example, ethics tells us that murder is always wrong. But knowing that murder is always wrong, people might have a wide array of thoughts about how the crime of murder should be prosecuted. Should it be punished with a life sentence? Should it be punished with some kind of rehabilitation in conjunction with prison time? Should it be punished with the death penalty? Those are questions of politics. How do we organize our society around the truth that murder is always and everywhere wrong? There's plenty of room for debate on the political questions of how we structure society around that truth. But the church can and must, in fact, tell us that truth, that murder is always wrong. The church seeks to give us these kinds of fundamental principles through the Ten Commandments and through her moral teaching generally. The work of the laity, the work that bishops and clergy must not intrude upon, is working out how best to structure society around those truths. That in part means that lay Catholic politicians have to sometimes compromise, not on whether or not or what those principles are. No, those we must hold to as Catholics, but Catholic politicians and Catholic voters sometimes do have to compromise on what we should prioritize, how we work out in a society filled with people who disagree with our first principles. How do we work out the solution, the practical way of organizing things that best fulfills our fundamental beliefs, our moral beliefs as Catholics? The bishops have repeatedly, and again this year, released a document titled Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, in which they lay out those principles, those ethical, moral principles, those teachings of the Church. What are we obliged to set as our priority as Catholics when we enter into the political sphere of working out how we apply those principles to our practical life? I invite you as Catholics to engage those questions. Talk about them with your friends and neighbors. Talk about them with your fellow Catholics. Talk about them with non-Catholics. Hash out how we achieve a just ordering of society that best upholds those principles of justice that the Church teaches us. But I also invite you to submit to the Church, to trust the Church as she gives us those fundamental principles. Archbishop Listecki, when he offered the invocation at the Republican National Convention, was not endorsing a political party or candidate, was praying for our country, for the politicians who invited him to pray for them, and for all of us, that we might engage in society with those truths taught by the Church, working out politically the best way to order society. I hope this helps you understand how Catholics and clergy can and should engage in the political arena.